Colin.
Yes? You see that story about the car full of black people hit a guy riding a bicycle? They ran over him on purpose. Then when they got out of the car, they started fighting everybody. They even tried to tase the people who tried to stop them. They fought the cops too. Yeah, we did that story. It was in Chicago. The guy's in the hospital and the guy's in the hospital, but he's alive. No, Colin, not that one. It was in San Francisco. No, Chicago. San Francisco! Chicago. Look, here's the clip. Here's the story. I get in this conversation, some version of it a couple times a month. People send me these stories. I've already seen them. Politely say thank you. And let's go on to the next story. Sometimes people also recycle old stories, which I like to see. I like as a reminder when I think of bicycle stories. I think of this one in Baltimore. And White Girl Bleed a Lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. And on this channel, we've done so many stories of black mob violence against people riding bicycles. Not usually using their cars, usually just knocking them off the bike, robbing them, laughing at them, beating the hell out of them, that kind of thing, all over the country. Sometimes that's not all there is to it. Colin, you gotta do that bicycle story. We did the bicycle stories in Chicago. I thought we just went over this. Colin, you're not listening to me. Okay, what are you talking about? It happened again in San Francisco. Hold it. You're trying to tell me that a car full of black people intentionally ran over a white guy on a bicycle in San Francisco, and it happened the day after the exact same thing happened in Chicago. I don't believe that. It's true, Colin. Here's the clip. Yeah. Well, my bad. It happened. It was Friday in Chicago. In San Francisco, they had like a bicycle to work day, whatever they're calling that up there these days. And if anybody wants to say the bicyclist can be a little bit on the obnoxious side, listen, okay, I'm down with that. This is not about that. This bicyclist was riding to work. There was a bunch of other bicyclists around, crowded downtown street. Car comes, cuts him off, almost runs him up on the curb. Car full of black people. He takes his hand out and he hits the back of their car a couple times. And he says something like, "Hey, knock it off. Watch where you're going." And he moves on down the road. Black people in the car put their windows down and offered him a few choice suggestions as to what he could do and what kind of person he really was. They might not have been the kindest suggestions. Anyway, he stops at the car and he gets ahead of them. They stopped at the light and they run him down intentionally. Okay, this is from the comments of SFist. Here's a guy who actually saw the whole thing happen. I saw the whole thing. Started blah blah. They cut the cyclist off, causing him to run into the curb. He smacked their trunk with his hand and yelled for them to look out. They screamed nonsense back at him and they both proceeded. 30 yards later, they rear-ended him and he falls. They were creeping along, doing maybe 5 miles an hour and fully capable of stopping. They did not. They intentionally ran over him, dragged him under the car, then did it again with the rear tires. They expressed no concern for the crushed guy. They actually yelled to the hostile crowd that he got what he deserved. This was no accident. Here's another comment, same guy. When I left the scene, she and her friends were being detained. They even attempted to get away. From that, when the cops arrived, all three were yelling around, going, "Don't touch me! Don't touch me!" They were going so slow after the first rollover, it looked like they stopped when the crowd screamed. I thought it was over, then they accelerated and rolled over him again. The bicyclist is in the hospital, a fractured spine and a fractured pelvis. Lots more details there. Picture. At some point, the young ladies that we see here, they pulled out some mace. No, they pulled a taser out and they threatened to taser people. In the Chicago story, one of the people in the car They ran over that bicyclist. He was given a ticket for driving without a license, maybe without insurance. Everything that happened to him was misdemeanor, no jail time. The police captain told a community meeting it was clearly intentional, so you can check out that video too. In this case, though, the cops came. They definitely arrested them and charged them with a felony, appropriate to what happens when you use your car to run somebody over. All this happened on Take Your Bike to Work Day, on a day that actually should have been named Don't Make the Black Kids Angry Day.
How does accounting help businesses? Businesses need cash to operate. They need cash to pay salaries, buy inventory, and make large purchases, sometimes called capital purchases, like equipment in order to run their business. Businesses get cash primarily from two sources. The first source are banks. In accounting, we call them creditors. And in finance, this is known as debt financing. The second source is investors. You can think of the stock market as investors because stockholders are investors of large corporations. But an owner of a small business is also an investor of the small business. In finance, this is known as equity financing. So how do investors and creditors decide who to invest or lend money to? This is where accounting comes into the picture. Accounting records the financial transactions of a business and communicates this information to potential investors and creditors. The output of the accounting process are the financial statements. An income statement reports a business's profitability. A statement of the change of equity reports the changes in the owner's equity. A balance sheet details the economic resources of a business and the claims on those resources. Finally, a statement of cash flows summarizes the cash inflows and outflows for various business activities. Businesses with good financial statements tend to get the money. Businesses with poor financial statements often do not. This is because cash, again sometimes called capital in finance, is a scarce resource. Investors and creditors do not have an unlimited supply of cash, so they have to choose who gets it and who does not. This concept is called capital rationing. But that creates a dilemma for investors and creditors. How do they know that the accounting from one company to the next is done correctly and with the same procedures and guidelines? The accounting profession has a list of accounting standards that must be followed to ensure that all similar transactions are accounted for the same way. These standards are known as generally accepted accounting principles and will heretofore be known as GAAP. So GAAP are the accounting rules that tell us how to account for specific transactions. GAAP is the foundation of financial accounting. In the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, requires all companies whose stock is traded on an open market, like a stock market, to prepare their financial statements in accordance to GAAP. Failure to do so would cause the company to go out of business and could possibly lead to accounting fraud. So all companies comply with this requirement. The SEC has deferred the creation of GAAP to a private, non-government organization known as the Financial Accounting Standards Board, or FASB. Although this is an oversimplification, you can think of it as the FASB creates GAAP for U.S. companies. For the rest of the world, there are different accounting principles and guidelines. The most common set of international accounting standards are known as International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS or IFRS. IFRS is created by the International Accounting Standards Board, or the IASB. So to summarize, in the US, the FASB creates GAAP, and internationally, the IASB creates IFRS. So why is this international stuff important, besides the obvious reason that we live in a global economy? The SEC wants GAAP and IFRS to merge or converge into one set of standards worldwide. This process has been incredibly slow and began in 2002, but it does continue. And that concludes this brief review of the purpose of financial accounting.